page 64 and page 65. In this page I have actually started to recreate an old technique that I created during shaving foam marbling. From doing this, I thought it would be a good document to take for traces from both photography and in my book. This is what I done in school by actually leaving out my shaving cream that had some ink on it, which starts to set, which has actually changed in a different way from doing. From this I've done two examples, one from shaving foam that I've scraped onto some paper that was on my squeegee, that's all mixed it, and some that was left on my shaving foam, which was also previously mixed from the last one, which was in some images, then flattened down, which is why it's so grey. This was a 10 minutes from when it was left on this image, where it seems normal and fine, all light and cheerfully. The next day it started to darken straight away. The first one where it was foam that was already mixed up and blue, where it started to dark, where it started to dry around the edges, especially on the larger surface. It only began to darken around the corners of this piece for some reason. It might be because the centre was too heavily thicked, but you can see where it started to change and got darker and darker. The next day it got even worse, where you could see where all the shaving foam sunk down straight away, and you can see where it started to get all little bits of dark to completely brown and disgusting colour. I found that this was quite different compared to what I'd done at school, as it just started to shrivel up and just melt into some cardboard, but it might be to do that I used some paper from my sketchbook which was too thin to the point it couldn't absorb anymore. As for day 3, it seemed that all the ink started to settle, all the shaving foam and brown lines started to settle down in this image. You can see where they've shrunk even more. But as for the little blue one, it didn't do anything, it still remained the same. As you can see. As for day 4, something actually changed, where it somehow got even worse than it was on day 3, where all the shriveled up areas began to expand again. That might be to do with light, I thought, after a while. As after the sunset, it started to shrivel back up straight away, which I captured in day 4, as none of the sun came out. But as soon as I turned on the light, after a while, it did begin to retract again. As for this piece, nothing changed again. And in the end, I decided, because none of this brown leftovers would go away, I got a spoon and I scratched off all the brown stuff, which is shown in this piece. You can see some of the brown residue on the edges mainly, but none of the pattern originally from day 1 stuck onto the actual base. You can see a few splodges, but that was where there was less shaving foam or already touched that page. It's kind of disappointing how it didn't happen again. On this piece, you can see a few little pieces of the pattern slowly, and also a few bits of the leftovers that wasn't scratched off. For some reason it didn't transfer all the pattern once it sunk. It might be to do that the paper's too thin and it didn't sink and absorb as much as I wanted it to. Next time, if I have time in this project, I will show how it happened in my actual first technique using cardboard from school. But I decided to stick in the photos that I'd done and show the documentary of the few days of the changes that the shaving foam had. As for page 65, I've stuck in a little experiment of embroidery, which also relates back to my previous project from all the embroidery, but I just done a few different types. I done the little triangle stitch. I done lots of French knots and some simple stitches that over backed after and got through all the little gaps. This will be included, but the reason why I haven't actually done that much embroidery again is because it's shown in my last project that I've done embroidery. I didn't want to add in too much because embroidery takes a very long time to complete, especially to keep it nice and neat and do all these different cross stitchings, French knots for myself. As for the other pieces, I've done a few experiments using a match which I lit and then washed under a tap so then I get all the ashes to flare up, which you can see I have actually scratched the matchstick onto paper. It kind of looks quite nice, similar to charcoal, but it's also quite weak in comparison. As for this piece, I've used some dry ash, which I believe I have actually just rubbed some ash onto the paper from where it fell off. It's too faint compared to the rubbing the stick on, which I kind of dislike, but going to my next idea, it's actually works much more effective than the both two, where I've actually wet the ash completely, where I've left it under the tap for a while, and then rubbed it onto some paper and used a paintbrush as well to help spread it. This has been quite effective. It has the same colour as graphite, but also thick like watercolour. This might be nice, but I kind of dislike the style of it. I kind of want to be safe about this idea though, because using a matchstick is very small and it's easily that I could probably burn my hand. As for if I went to college and I burnt some paper or large quality and works with actual ash after, then using the ash and the smoke burn parts of a stick, I'd be able to work with much of a large scale, which I couldn't do.